I mean, since you came on board, you've been talking to a lot of press and fans and interacting with the community. What have those people taught you that you didn't know before about what they want from Final Fantasy XV specifically?
There were several, actually. The first being Final Fantasy was not as known as I had originally thought. So everyone, in terms of the media, consumers, gamers, publishers, developers, they all know Final Fantasy. But in terms of how many Final Fantasy titles there have been or what the latest number is in the mainline game, not a lot of people knew. So a lot of the core fans, of course, know where we are in the numbered series, but others, they would know Final Fantasy, the original game. They would know Final Fantasy VII, and then maybe 10. But where were we at? That would kind of be the reaction that we would get. And so we got the true landscape and current environment of where Final Fantasy stands. And the other thing that we really realized that those who know Final Fantasy, many of them and most of them perceive Final Fantasy VII to be the best Final Fantasy, and then nothing has been able to exceed that particular installment.
Is this just market research that Square does, or where exactly do you acquire feedback when you're looking for it?
That's actually a reality that I personally felt through talking to gamers, consumers, publishers, developers, first party, or media, and not through market research or anything of that sort. One other important thing that I've been able to feel from a lot of the Final Fantasy fans are that they are disappointed in the current state of Final Fantasy, but also still look forward to or have some hope in terms of where the Final Fantasy brand could go.
Do you feel like you understand that disappointment, or is it a mystery to you to some degree?
No, this is something that I can definitely understand. And the reality is, it's not that the situation is okay or in favor of us. Rather, it is a more grave and serious situation that we had initially thought. That's not purely to say that it's a disappointment in the content of Final Fantasy. Within the disappointment, it also includes things like the long development time. And so there are areas that can be improved upon, and so my hope is to kind of improve upon certain aspects and to gradually relieve that disappointment.
I'm fascinated by your research and your realistic perspective on the brand. Do you find it difficult when you're embedded in this world and you work with it every day to maintain that outsider's perspective?
Maybe it would have been a little bit more difficult for people who have been involved with the mainline numbered Final Fantasy series development for a very long time. That said, Final Fantasy XV is the first numbered mainline Final Fantasy title I'm personally involved in, so it may have been easier for me to kind of directly take in that reality.
So I'm curious, what do you consider your personal biggest unanswered question about the Final Fantasy fan base and the overall brand? What keeps you up at night wondering about?
So the one thing that's unresolved is that obviously we haven't been able to release Final Fantasy XV that implements all that I thought would be the resolution for certain things. So in that sense, things haven't been resolved yet. But through communicating with different people, I did start to get a good sense of what people like about Final Fantasy or what they look forward to in a Final Fantasy game and what they're expecting or waiting for. And I'm hoping that Final Fantasy XV will be an answer to that.
My read of it is there's like a discrepancy amongst the fans where they're nostalgic over games like Final Fantasy VI. I think you also love Final Fantasy VI. And they have so much passion for that, and then they see Final Fantasy XV and they don't feel like it's hitting those same buttons. And I'm wondering, when you look at Final Fantasy XV, do you see that charming DNA of Final Fantasy VI still in there?
So whether Final Fantasy XV hits the buttons of those who feel nostalgia for 6, he feels is ultimately how we communicate the game through our marketing and how we're able to really communicate the appeal of Final Fantasy XV through our communication methods in order for them to get a sense that it will hit the same buttons. And so it's a little bit different from what type of contents we would like to create from a development perspective. And of course, that's not to say there are some important elements from a content perspective. So for example, Final Fantasy VI fans, those who believe Final Fantasy VI is the best Final Fantasy game are always looking for an experience on par with the experience they had with 6 in a Final Fantasy game. That goes for any series, because they have a title in the series that provided them or they felt was the best experience, they become fans. And because they became fans, they will expect an experience that's close to that best experience they've had with the installment and look to seek the same emotionally driven experiences. And so in terms of the latest installment, yes, it is different from 6, and it is different technologically, but that said, they may still be able to experience something that they've grown to love in the past. And of course, we're delivering our content with confidence, so ultimately it's kind of paired together. The way we communicate this as well as the content that actually encompasses the game, those should be thought of as a set in order to deliver the appropriate messaging and appropriate content for people to feel the same types of experiences.
It seems like there's this internal crusade to top Final Fantasy VII. And I wonder if you can talk about how much of a mantra that is for the team, or is that not as centralized a theme as I've got the impression of?
In terms of the team's objectives and goals, topping Final Fantasy VII isn't necessarily a clearly defined goal. But many consumers feel that Final Fantasy VII is, the best in the franchise and something that hasn't been able to be topped. And many among the development team also know that. And so if we don't set out to challenge that, then we can't set out to create the best in the franchise. And so I think that's where the philosophy kind of comes into play. And even from a production and a product standpoint, I feel that there is a lot to learn from that game.
So you talk about all the fans for Final Fantasy VII, and I'm sure they all have varying opinions, but it seems like people love that world, they love the story, they love the characters, and at that time, the technology was impressive. And it seems like of all those pillars that people have loved, it seems like you guys are really tripling down on making sure that the tech angle is what's going to wow people with Final Fantasy 15. And I'm curious, why put so much stock and effort into this incredibly expensive and difficult pillar of the Final Fantasy brand?
Well, kind of going back to Final Fantasy, of course, at the time, the image that they had was that they are an RPG that uses the latest technology. And in actuality, I believe it was. And after that, as an identity of the franchise, we continue to bring up that it is an RPG that utilizes the latest technology. But in reality, was that the case? I'm not sure if we can say so. So with Final Fantasy 15, we want to once again confidently deliver the fact that this is an RPG that we're delivering with the latest cutting-edge technology that we've mastered, and that's why we really want to kind of invest in that and also challenge ourselves on that front. And earlier we had talked about what FF fans potentially seek in Final Fantasy games, and he believes there's kind of 2 steps to that. The first being beautiful graphics that utilize the latest technology. And then second, an experience that is close to the experience that they had with their most favorite numbered Final Fantasy game. And so in that sense, I feel that it's very important to aim for the latest technology.
So the presentation you gave yesterday, it kind of gave the impression that you consider Final Fantasy 15 a make or break moment for the brand. Do you think that's accurate, or can you elaborate on how you're feeling in that field?
Yes, for Japan, I believe it is a make or break for the franchise. And if the Final Fantasy brand is on its demise in terms of its numbered mainline series within Japan, then I feel like it would also follow suit globally.
You just have more experience, more research with the Japan audience, so that's why you frame it that way?
No, that's not necessarily the case. The Japanese console game market is definitely getting smaller, and that directly connects to the fact that the demand for consoles and console games are declining. And at the same time, that means a decline in the Final Fantasy IP.
So it's a gigantic game, and you're on the home stretch of development here, and I just want to get a vibe of how you're feeling about it.
We do know what we need to do in order to kind of bring it to the finishing line. So from the development perspective, the only current feeling that I have is that I want to really properly complete the game. In terms of the people that we're delivering it to, we want them to know more and get to play the actual experience as soon as possible, and that's the only kind of sentiment I have towards it right now.